back, and welcome to the traditional start of the year gauntlet, where I attempt to see all of the films from 2022 that I have not yet gotten to before I cap off the year with my end of, best of, worst of, and yeah lists. And this gauntlet is kind of special because as I'm trying to do the gauntlet, I am also in the process of getting ready to move. So, yeah, gonna be heading down, and Becca and I are gonna be together, so she is going to be our regular host. And so a lot going on right now. So we're gonna see how many of these things I can get to in a week, because that's when I'm leaving. So we're gonna see how we do. So we started out with this one, which is, typical end of year Oscar bait from a highly regarded, respected filmmaker. So Steven Spielberg brings us his semi-autobiographical film of his formative years, The Fabelmans. Wow. This is one I wanted to check out for a couple of reasons, and not the least of them being that there seems to be a very clear divide critically about this film. Of course, in its advertising, the film will give you every great quote, one of the best films of the year, Spielberg amazes, all of that from the high-end critics. But from most of the people kind of on the ground, your everyday critics, kind of like myself and the other folks you might find on YouTube, just your amateurs or whatever, most of them are pretty united against this film, saying it's just, pandering. It's a lot of, it's an ego trip, it's a vanity project, and it's overrated and all of that. So again, when something's that divided, I kind of have to check it out and see what I think for myself, especially since I had already seen a film about an autobiographical film about a young director who was the lone film geek in his small town and was trying to come of age and come to terms and all that in that the Star Wars movie from a few months ago. So I already had some assumptions about this movie, and it was time to kind of put them to the test. And what do I think? I think my answer is a resounding meh. The film is not bad enough. It's Spielberg, so you're not going to get a poorly directed or mismanaged film. It's always going to look pretty good and kind of give that illusion of spit and polish. But taken as a whole, I find that the entire film is just kind of there and not really taking us in any new directions or giving us any new insights. Let's back up a little bit before we get into that. I actually had a whole introduction planned, which I just kind of skipped over, but it bears kind of giving the cliff notes on just for context. So, artistically, I subscribe to two major philosophies in terms of what makes a good piece of art, be that a novel, a sculpture, a painting, a film, a piece of acting, anything like that. And I think there are two universal truths that can be interpreted multiple ways, but there are two universal truths to artistic expression. Number one is that good art comes from strong emotion. Again, these aren't mysteries of the ages. A lot of people have said this kind of stuff, so yes, if you've heard it before, it's nothing new. But good art comes from strong emotion. Now, where I differ is that it's not always from negative emotion. Good art can come from positive emotion. I mean, that's where we get things like Star Wars or Indiana Jones. Those came from a genuine desire to recreate the film serials and adventure films that George Lucas loved so much as a kid. So there you go. That's a positive emotion. But it is true that more often than not, good art is us trying to process negative emotion. Something traumatic that happened, or something that we have a hard time wrapping our heads around, or that we feel we don't have any control over, which is a big theme in the early goings of this film. So, art has to come from strong emotion. Number two is that the best filmmakers, the best artists, put a piece of themselves into their work. Who they are, what they believe, what has happened to them. And the reason I want to bring this up is because, especially this last point, I think there are very few artists that embody that as much as Spielberg does, especially in his classic work. Anybody who has studied Spielberg knows that at a young age, his parents got divorced. He blamed his father for the majority of his life, and that became the subtext excuse me, of most of his most acclaimed work. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the third Indiana Jones film, Indy has a strained relationship with his father. E.T., all about someone leaving, I'll be right here. Even Jurassic Park is, has the subplot of Grant, who doesn't want kids, being forced into a role where he has to act as a parental figure, and finding that he's very good at it. So, the dealing with that early childhood trauma and that those abandonment issues are huge things that became major parts of some of his most endearing work. It came out in later years that what he believed to be true about his family life was not, that his mother was actually cheating on his father, and that she left him, and that the father didn't want the children to think ill of their mother, so he took the blame. And so Spielberg is now attempting to kind of make amends to both members of his family, and is trying to tell this story in as fair and even-handed a way as he could. And I don't know. I don't think that really came out well in this. So that's a lot of subtext and a lot of, film theory and, script analysis theory to get into the point of this movie is just kind of bland. And it's kind of all over the place. I think one of the big problems I have is it feels like it can't land on a single topic and fully explore that topic. It has to it feels like a bunch of smaller movies all smushed together. So the first part of the film is your typical, guy discovers he's a film geek and wants to become a film geek. They do bring up the thing that he wants to become a filmmaker so he can control the chaos in his life, and that he doesn't understand at a unconscious level when he's a little kid. And of course, they try to bring up the subplot of one parent supports his artistic endeavors, the other parent does not. They try to bring up this thing that his mother is an artist, she's a piano player, she's just this very free spirit who will dance in the moonbeams and all of this, while his father is an engineer and thinks very logically. So they try to give you this impression that she's very encouraging of his endeavors and his father is not. But that's actually not the case as we look at it. His father is actually very encouraging, likes his films, tells him that there's a lot of similarities between their dreams, buys him a lot of expensive equipment that he wants. And the worst thing he does is refers to filmmaking as a hobby. That's the worst thing that he does. And yet they're trying to build up this, you never believed in me subplot, which doesn't work because his father clearly did believe in him, at least in this storytelling. So that's the first part. Then, through his filmmaking, he discovers his mother having an affair with his father's best friend, Seth Rogen, and it becomes the trauma of carrying that secret. Okay, so that happens for a while. Then they move to California, where he suddenly becomes, young Sammy, suddenly becomes the target of anti-Semitic bullying, which, again, apparently did happen to our young Mr. Spielberg. And while this is happening, his mother is slowly, going crazy, buying monkeys and shit, which, again, apparently did happen, until Spielberg's filmmaking kind of wins over the anti-Semitic bullies. I don't know, and he's dating a Christian girl. It becomes very, very sitcom-y, and then that ends, and then it's into the divorce thing again, and it feels to me like it would have been better to focus on one of these events: the anti-Semitism in school, the issues with his family, and not try to handle all of them, because it just feels like the film goes off in so many bizarre directions, seemingly out of nowhere. And it becomes very jarring and very difficult to kind of connect to anything. For instance, there is this bizarre cameo by Judd Hirsch, who comes in as his uncle and goes on this ranting monologue about how, you're an artist and you can't have your family and your art too, and blah 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 blah. It's just this it's like this King Lear-esque monologue where it starts out nice and then goes insane. And you're just like, what the fuck is happening here? So I feel like it would have been better to focus on one thing. I also feel that, and I respect what he was doing here, because as I said, I think he's trying to be more fair and even-handed than he was in his youth, now that he has the benefit of years of hindsight and he's made some peace with his father. And so he's trying to paint both his mother and his father in a good light. But I don't think that works, because it gives us nothing as an audience to really grab onto. Like I said, they try to establish the whole "you never supported me, but his father did." I think it would have been much better for him. I think it would have been better for the story if he had kept it closer to what really happened and show it from his point of view at that age, where he blamed his father more for everything, and then discovers maybe at the end of the film that that's not the way things happen, and he has to reconnect with his father and understand. I think that would have been a better way to go. And I sympathize and I understand with the desire to kind of not want to make one parent the villain, the de facto villain. But I also think that for narrative structure, I think we kind of needed that a little bit. And I think, honestly, in doing so, and doing it this way, it actually paints his mother in a worse light than I think he intended. It makes his mother look like a terrible person. Speaking of which, this film there's the same complaint I had with our other coming-of-age stories, the Star Wars one, the Apocalypse Time one. But once again, we run into this problem. And I don't know if it's me or if this is just, but we run into this problem where once again, our protagonist, our main character, the self-insert character for our director and main creative voice, is not a very likable character. He's kind of a dick, you know, and I have a very hard time sympathizing with him or connecting with him or anything of that nature. He just comes off as like I say, it's very stereotypical and very archetypical of characters in movies like this. You know, this is our deep thinker, our artistic thinker, and so therefore his means of artistic expression, or I should say his means of emotional expression, is to just kind of glower and stare, just kind of, I'm so lost in my deep thoughts. I'm also going to say, just putting it out there a little bit, and I understand that Spielberg loved his mother very much, and he described her more as a sister to him than a mother, which is interesting phrasing. But I'm going to say this kid kind of has a little bit of an Oedipal thing going on, it feels like. You know, there's this scene where Michelle Williams, who's playing his mother, this is not her best performance and by far her worst haircut, they're on a camping trip, and she just gets the impulse to start ballet dancing in the night. And Seth Rogen, who is openly flirting with her throughout this entire camping trip in front of her husband and children, turns on the headlights so she can dance, and there's lights so young Spielberg can film. And the light is like shining through her nightie, and you can see it. And he's filming it just like, ooh, ah. And his younger sister's like, you know, people can see through your nightgown. You might want to. And they're, no. So it's like, okay, little creepy there. Oh, Oedipus. Oh, you scamp. I'm just saying, that could just be the way I'm reading it, but it's. I think one of the problems with this movie, and it's almost a problem that is of no fault of its own in a way, is that this is now the third coming-of-age story I've seen this year. And they all tackle kind of some variation on the same themes. I remember when I was in college, and I went to the first time I ever went to the American College Theater Festival, and all the plays had some mixture of the same exact themes. Child molesting and Jewish people. Like, all of them had some variation on one of those themes. One of them had both, you know, so you start going, okay. And that's the same thing here. We saw the Apocalypse one, which dealt with anti-Semitism and family difficulties. We saw the Star Wars one, which was the date, which I can never get the date right, so I'm not going to try, where, you know, the young artistic genius is dealing with, you know, family issues and coming to terms with things. And you kind of build to this one, which, because it's Spielberg, one of the most celebrated filmmakers of this or any other generation, you figure this is going to be the one. This is going to be the capper of them. This is going to be the superior one. And in fact, it is just as kind of meandering and pointless and dull as the Anthony Hopkins one, and it is not as raw and artistically fulfilling as the Star Wars one. So this film, this coming-of-age story, gives us no new information, gives us no new insight. It doesn't do anything new that hasn't been done in a dozen other stories like it. or the two just like it, which have come out this very same year, even though, yes, the Star Wars one was made actually 13 years ago. So, the question you have to say is, besides Oscar baiting and Spielberg still trying to work through his parental issues, what the hell is the point of this? And I don't really see one. I do have to say, before I get to the final grade, there is this really great thing that happens at the end of the film, which again is supposedly a true life story, where young Sammy, meets director John Ford, who gives him a cuss-filled lecture in filmmaking, and he says that, keep this in mind, when the horizon is at the top of the shot, it's interesting. When it's at the bottom of the shot, it's interesting. It's at the middle, it's boring as fuck. Okay, and the film ends with young Sammy walking, towards these buildings on this Hollywood set. The camera set up so the horizon is right in the middle, and then the camera suddenly jerkily sets up so that the horizon's at the top. I thought that was actually a cute ending. And I actually kind of wish the film was a little bit more like that, a little bit more breaking of the fourth wall. Again, kind of like the Star Wars one was, where it was very home movie-esque. It looked like a home movie, and I just think that one felt more real and more tangible than this spit-polished, not wanting to offend anybody, work through my mommy and daddy issues thing. It just didn't click for me. So there you have it. So all right, let's wrap this up. So final grade for the Fabelmans for me, I'm sorry, it's a solid C job. I'm almost tempted to go a C minus on it, but I'll be nice and say a C, just for no reason. Yeah, I have no reason for not giving it a C minus. I'm just gonna say a C. You know what? No, fuck that. C minus. This is a C minus job. Sorry, not sorry. So there you have it. Unless you're a Spielberg, real deep Spielberg fanboy or girl, there's not really much of a reason to check this one out. Go check out one of the other. Go check out the Star Wars one. It's better. All right. So, one film from the gauntlet down. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for coming along. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.